This week we looked a bit at speciation, which is where one species splits into two. Now remember, a species is a group of organisms that have genes in common, look similar, and can breed to produce fertile offspring. That's why mules don't count. To make a simple example, we have these square animals, or squanimals. And let's say the squanimals are living in an area quite happily, and then suddenly a barrier appears in the shape of this river. We now have two separate groups of squanimals. They have isolation, separated from one another. Now, time goes on, and over time, we get mutation. Just random changes happen in the genes, so that the squanimals on this side of the barrier, some of them mutate to have pointy heads. And the squanimals on this side of the barrier, well, some of them mutate to have hairy heads. There we go, hairy heads. So we've had isolation, we've had mutation. The next step is called selection. And it turns out that pointy heads are quite good because the snow runs off their head and they don't get cold in the winter. So the previous version of squanimals, well, they die out. And for a similar reason, it turns out that hairy heads are a good advantage because it keeps them warm in the winter. So these ones die out. So we're now left with pointy-headed ones on this side of the river and fluffy-headed ones on this side of the river. So we've now had isolation, mutation, selection. Time goes by, the river dries up. We're now left with two different populations of squanimals. But because they've mutated so much over the time when they were isolated, they can no longer breed together for whatever reason, doesn't really matter what reason. And they've now become two separate species. So no matter how hard they try, if they wanted to, they can't breed together to produce fertile offspring, so they are separate species. And that speciation has occurred. So we had isolation, mutation, selection, and then speciation.